If you're driving south from Las Vegas toward California along Interstate 15, you'll pass through a stretch of desert highway that feels increasingly desolate as you leave the city behind. About 25 miles southwest of the strip, you'll see a lonely highway sign that simply says Xi'an. Most people never stop. They barely even slow down. They just notice a giant gas station complex on one side of the freeway, and on the other side, a tall, lifeless hotel tower rising incongruously from the empty desert landscape. That building, standing silent and abandoned against the Nevada sky, used to be Terrible's Hotel and Casino. For years, Terrible's was the only real landmark in John, Nevada, a tiny, unincorporated community that exists primarily as a dot on the map between Las Vegas and the California state line. Today, that hotel stands as something far different than what it once was. It's become an accidental monument to failed plans, changing economics, and the unpredictable nature of development in the modern American West. This is the story of a building that was supposed to be demolished years ago, and the complicated reasons why it's still standing. To understand what Terrible's Hotel and Casino has become, you first need to understand what it used to be. The hotel originally opened in the late 1980s under a different name, the Gold Strike Hotel and Gambling Hall. At that time, Jean was positioned as a convenient roadside casino destination, offering something that Las Vegas itself was becoming less able to provide: easy access, simple parking, and affordable rooms without the crowds and complexity of the Strip. The Gold Strike was designed as a casual, no-frills operation. It wasn't trying to compete with the mega resorts that were beginning to transform Las Vegas. Instead, it served a specific niche market. It was the first or last stop for travelers crossing the Nevada-California border, depending on which direction you were heading. If you were driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, Jean was where you'd start to feel like you were entering Nevada casino country. If you were leaving Las Vegas and heading back to California, it was your last chance to play some slots or grab a meal before crossing back into a state where casino gambling wasn't legal. The property offered exactly what its target customers wanted: a place to grab a reasonably priced meal, play some slot machines and table games without the intimidation factor of the big strip casinos, and stay for a night in a clean, affordable room. The hotel wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. It served truckers, road trippers, budget-conscious families, and locals from the surrounding area who wanted a quick casino experience without driving all the way into Las Vegas. For years, this business model worked reasonably well. The property changed ownership and names several times over the decades, eventually becoming part of the Terrible Herbst Corporation, a regional company best known for its chain of gas stations and convenience stores throughout Nevada and the Southwest. Under the Terrible's brand, the hotel continued operating as a roadside casino, serving the steady stream of traffic along Interstate 15. Then came 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic, which devastated the hospitality and gaming industry across Nevada and the entire country. When Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak ordered all casinos in the state to close in March 2020 to slow the spread of the virus, Terrible's Hotel and Casino shut its doors along with every other gaming property in Nevada. But unlike the major strip resorts and most other casinos that eventually reopened once restrictions were lifted, Terrible's never came back. The property remained closed month after month, then year after year. The reasons for the permanent closure were never officially detailed in any public statement, but the economics are not difficult to understand. Small roadside casinos like Terrible's operate on thin profit margins. They depend on consistent traffic and volume to cover their operating costs. When the pandemic disrupted travel patterns and created months of uncertainty about when and how casinos could operate, properties like Terrible's found themselves in an impossible situation. Reopening would require bringing back staff, restocking inventory, resuming utility services, and covering all the fixed costs of operation, all without any certainty about whether customer traffic would return to pre-pandemic levels. For a small operation without the financial resources of a major casino corporation, the risk was simply too great. So Terrible's Hotel and Casino remained closed, and as months turned into years, it became clear that it would never reopen. Since the permanent closure, the property has been left to deteriorate in the harsh desert environment. Today, if you take the time to exit the freeway and drive around the site, what you'll see looks like something from a post-apocalyptic movie set. The building has taken on the appearance of an abandoned ruin, a structure that was once functional and inhabited, but has now been surrendered to the elements. The ground floor windows are completely boarded up with plywood that has weathered and faded in the intense desert sun. Windows on the higher floors that aren't boarded up are shattered, leaving dark, empty openings that stare out over the desert like hollow eyes. The once shiny glass tower exterior, which would have gleamed in the sunlight when the property was operational and maintained, is now sun-bleached and streaked with grime, dust, and the residue of years of neglect. The building's facade shows the unmistakable signs of a structure that has been exposed to extreme heat, cold, wind, and occasional desert rainstorms without any maintenance or protection. The parking lot that once accommodated hundreds of vehicles is now cracked and broken, with weeds pushing up through the asphalt and creating an increasingly chaotic patchwork of vegetation and deteriorating pavement. Behind the main building, the evidence of disaster is even more dramatic. Black scorch marks crawl up the concrete exterior walls where a fire broke out and damaged part of the structure. The fire, which occurred several months ago, was never fully explained in public reports, but abandoned buildings are always at risk for fires caused by electrical problems, arson, or accidents involving trespassers. What remains in the burned section includes an exposed metal staircase that climbs several stories into open air, surrounded by mounds of rubble, twisted metal, and debris. Standing in the parking lot, you can hear the constant hum of trucks and cars on Interstate 15, which runs just a few hundred feet away. But otherwise, the site is eerily quiet. There are no voices, no sounds of activity, no signs of life. It's just the wind, the distant traffic, and the creaking of a building slowly falling apart. This is the current face of Jean, Nevada, a ghost of a casino surrounded by half-finished plans and uncertain futures. The ruins of Terrible's Hotel and Casino have become such a distinctive and visually striking location that they actually caught the attention of a film production company a few years ago. A horror and action production company filed plans with local authorities to shoot a post-apocalyptic Netflix movie at the site. The film, which had the ambitious title The Battle of Absolute Dominion, was set in the year 2085, decades after religious wars had destroyed most of human civilization. In the film's storyline, the United Nations saves what remains of humanity by organizing a no-rules martial arts tournament to decide which faction will control the last remaining resources on Earth. For a production designer looking for a location that could convincingly portray a ruined city in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, the abandoned Terrible's Hotel was perfect. There was no need to build elaborate sets or spend money on visual effects to create the appearance of a destroyed building. This one already existed, complete with broken windows, fire damage, and an atmosphere of desolation. The production company saw the location as a ready-made film set that would save them significant time and money. But around the same time that the film production was being planned, the entire property changed hands in a major real estate transaction that would alter the future of the site. A developer based in Reno, Nevada, purchased the entire property, including the dead casino building, the surrounding land, and over 140 acres of adjacent desert real estate for approximately $44.7 million. This was not a small investment or a speculative purchase. This was a serious acquisition by a developer with specific plans for the site, and those plans had nothing to do with movies or casinos. The new owner wanted to completely demolish the hotel and casino building and construct in its place a massive 1.9 million square foot warehouse and distribution complex that would be called the South Vegas Industrial Center. This was not a plan to renovate or repurpose the existing structure. This was a plan to erase it entirely and replace it with something completely different, transforming Jean from a failed casino outpost into a modern logistics hub. To understand why a developer would invest nearly $45 million in a remote desert location with a dead casino on it, you need to understand the economics and geography of warehouse and distribution operations. Jean sits exactly 25 miles southwest of the Las Vegas Strip, right along Interstate 15, which is the main transportation corridor connecting Las Vegas to Southern California. For trucking companies and logistics operations hauling freight from the massive ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, Jean occupies an almost ideal location. It's close enough to Las Vegas to be considered part of the greater Las Vegas market, but far enough away to avoid the traffic congestion, high land prices, and operational complications of building within the city itself. The vision that the developer had for the South Vegas Industrial Center was straightforward and, on paper at least, economically compelling. Truckers could haul loads from the California ports, drive the relatively short distance to Jean, drop off their cargo at the warehouse complex, and then turn around and drive back to California, potentially making it home the same day. This would create a highly efficient logistics operation that would appeal to companies looking for warehouse and distribution space to serve the Las Vegas market and the broader Southwest region. When the property was purchased in early 2022, the timing seemed perfect. Warehouse demand across southern Nevada and much of the western United States was at a record high. The COVID-19 pandemic had accelerated the growth of e-commerce as consumers shifted dramatically toward online shopping. Companies like Amazon, Walmart, Target, and countless others were desperately seeking warehouse and distribution space to support their expanding logistics networks. Vacancy rates for industrial warehouse space in the Las Vegas area were hovering around just 2%, which is extraordinarily low and indicates a severe shortage of available space. Developers couldn't build new warehouse facilities fast enough to meet the surging demand from companies that needed space immediately. In this environment, a large-scale warehouse development in a strategic location like Jean seemed like a can't-miss investment. The developer moved forward with plans, filed the necessary permits and applications, and prepared to demolish the old casino and begin construction on the new industrial complex. But then, as so often happens in real estate development, the market shifted dramatically and unexpectedly. By late 2024, just 2 years after the property was purchased, the warehouse market in southern Nevada had completely transformed. Vacancy rates, which had been at 2% when the Jean property was acquired, had climbed to 11.5%, the highest level in more than a decade. What happened? Developers, responding to the intense demand and low vacancy rates of 2021 and 2022, had built too much warehouse space too quickly. Millions of square feet of new industrial space came online across the Las Vegas Valley and surrounding areas, flooding the market with available space, just as demand was beginning to soften. At the same time, broader economic factors were making companies more cautious about expanding their warehouse footprints. High interest rates, which the Federal Reserve had raised aggressively to combat inflation, made financing new leases and expansions more expensive. Trade tensions, including tariffs on imported goods and unstable import prices, created uncertainty about future shipping volumes and made companies hesitant to commit to long-term warehouse leases. The e-commerce boom that had driven so much warehouse demand during the pandemic began to moderate as consumers returned to in-person shopping and as the extraordinary growth rates of online retail normalized. Faced with this dramatically changed market environment, the new owners of the Jean property made the prudent business decision to put the brakes on the development project. There was no point in spending tens of millions of dollars to demolish the old casino and build a massive warehouse complex if there weren't tenants ready to lease the space. An empty warehouse is just as useless as an empty casino, and far more expensive to build. So the South Vegas Industrial Center project was put on hold, waiting for market conditions to improve and for demand to justify moving forward with construction. And that means the hotel remains standing, a towering monument to plans that haven't yet materialized, waiting indefinitely for the next phase of its existence. Meanwhile, as the months and years pass, the Terrible's building continues to deteriorate and has transformed into something between a landmark and an eyesore, depending on your perspective. The longer it sits abandoned and unmaintained, the worse it looks. Its upper floors are completely dark and empty, with no lights, no activity, no signs of life. The backside of the building is heavily scarred from the fire that broke out months ago, with black scorch marks and structural damage clearly visible from the highway. On windy days, which are common in the open desert, bits of debris, loose materials, and trash scatter across the parking lot and surrounding area. The interior of the building, which was once filled with slot machines, table games, restaurants, hotel rooms, and all the infrastructure of a functioning casino resort, is now reportedly covered in black mold. Years of rain leaking through the damaged roof and broken windows have created the perfect conditions for mold growth, which has spread throughout the interior spaces, making the building not just abandoned, but actively hazardous to enter. Locals who regularly drive between Primm and Las Vegas along Interstate 15 have given the structure a nickname, the Dead Hotel. It's become a familiar landmark, something you notice and comment on as you pass by. Truckers who are constantly traveling the I-15 corridor sometimes use the empty parking lot as an unofficial rest area, pulling in to park their rigs and take a break before continuing their journey. Skydivers from the nearby skydiving center, which operates small planes that take jumpers up to altitude before they leap out, use the tall hotel tower as a visual landmark for navigation, helping them orient themselves during their descent and ensure they land in the correct drop zone. But despite all these incidental uses, no one stays at the hotel. No one checks in, no one sleeps in the rooms, no one eats in the restaurants, no one gambles in the casino. The building serves no functional purpose beyond being a marker, a reference point, a thing that exists but doesn't do anything. And that's part of the larger truth about Jean, Nevada, a truth that helps explain why the casino closed and why the warehouse project stalled. Jean is not really a town in any meaningful sense. No one actually lives here as part of a residential community. There are no neighborhoods with houses where families live. There are no schools where children attend classes. There are no grocery stores where residents shop for food. There are no parks, libraries, community centers, or any of the other infrastructure that defines a functioning town. Jean exists as a service outpost, a place where certain facilities are located to serve people who are passing through, but not a place where people actually build lives and establish roots. The only consistent population in Jean comes from the Jean Conservation Camp, a minimum security women's prison facility operated by the Nevada Department of Corrections. Approximately 240 inmates live and work at the facility, which provides a labor force for various state projects and programs. But a prison population is not the same as a residential community. The inmates are there involuntarily, they don't participate in the local economy, and they don't create the kind of social and economic fabric that sustains a real town. Last month, in September 2025, Jean made headlines again, but not for anything related to the abandoned casino or the stalled warehouse project. Instead, the news was about a serious skydiving accident that highlighted both the ongoing activity at the skydiving center and the inherent risks of the sport. Two sets of skydivers jumped from approximately 11,000 feet above Jean around noon on a clear day. One pair of jumpers, consisting of a student and an instructor, experienced a catastrophic parachute malfunction during their descent. According to a detailed report from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, which investigated the incident, both the main parachute and the backup reserve parachute failed to deploy properly. This is an extremely rare occurrence, as modern skydiving equipment is designed with multiple redundancies specifically to prevent this kind of double failure. The skydivers, unable to slow their descent, hit the ground at an estimated speed of 35 to 45 miles per hour, suffering severe and life-threatening injuries. Emergency responders were called to the scene, and both individuals were airlifted by medical helicopter to trauma centers in Las Vegas for emergency treatment. The instructor who survived the accident and was able to speak with police investigators explained what had gone wrong during the jump. He said that he had noticed problems with the main parachute almost immediately after deployment. The main chute wasn't opening or functioning as well as it should have, creating a dangerous situation that required deploying the reserve parachute. But when he attempted to deploy the reserve, that parachute also malfunctioned. According to his account, the reserve chute jammed because a component called a slider, which is part of the parachute deployment system, didn't move down all the way as it's supposed to. This mechanical failure prevented the reserve parachute from fully opening and providing the necessary drag to slow their descent to a safe speed. The result was a partially deployed or tangled parachute that couldn't support their weight, leading to the high-speed impact with the ground. The skydiving center where the jump originated is actually one of the only businesses still actively operating in Jean. Every day, weather permitting, small planes take off from a nearby airstrip, climb to altitude over the empty desert and the abandoned casino, and release groups of jumpers who experience the thrill of freefall before deploying their parachutes and gliding back to Earth. For the skydiving operation, Jean's remote location and open desert terrain are actually advantages, providing plenty of empty space for jumpers to land safely without the risk of coming down in populated areas. Across the highway from the dead hotel tower is Terrible's Roadhouse, a facility that represents the other side of the Terrible Herbst brand and a very different kind of success story. The Roadhouse is a 50,000 square foot gas station and convenience store complex that bills itself as the world's largest Chevron station. Calling it just a gas station, however, doesn't really capture what the facility is. It's essentially a small shopping mall that also happens to sell fuel. The Roadhouse includes dozens of gas pumps to accommodate the constant flow of vehicles. But inside the massive building, you'll find a full-service restaurant, a large convenience store with an extensive selection of snacks, drinks, and travel supplies, clean restrooms, a gift shop with Nevada and Las Vegas souvenirs, and various other amenities designed to serve travelers. Unlike the Dead Hotel across the highway, the Roadhouse is busy day and night, packed with families on road trips, long-haul truckers taking breaks, and tourists who need to fuel up and stretch their legs. The contrast between the two Terribles branded properties, one thriving and one abandoned, sitting directly across the highway from each other, is stark and somewhat surreal. Jean is, in many ways, a weird place. It occupies a strange liminal space in the geography and economy of southern Nevada. It's not quite Las Vegas, though it's close enough to be considered part of the greater Las Vegas area for some purposes. It's not quite Primm, the slightly larger casino town just a few miles south that sits right on the California-Nevada border. And it's not really its own independent town with its own identity and community. For decades, Jean's economy depended almost entirely on drivers, on the constant flow of traffic along Interstate 15. People would stop for gas, grab some food, play a few spins on the slot machines, maybe stay overnight in an inexpensive hotel room, and then continue on their way. This model worked reasonably well when Jean was one of the few options available along that stretch of highway. But as travel patterns changed over the years, as bigger and more attractive casino resorts like those in Primm Valley drew more of the traffic, and as gas stations and restaurants became more common along the interstate, Jean's small-town casino model stopped making economic sense. The Gold Strike and later Terrible's Hotel and Casino couldn't compete with larger, newer properties that offered more amenities, better gaming options, and more attractive accommodations. The property became increasingly obsolete, serving a shrinking market until the pandemic finally provided the excuse to close permanently. Despite all the challenges and setbacks, the new owners of the property remain publicly optimistic about the long-term potential of the site. They continue to believe that the location, sitting just 25 miles from the Las Vegas Strip with direct access to the I-15 corridor, is simply too strategically valuable to remain dormant forever. The company's website still lists ambitious plans for the South Vegas Industrial Center, describing a development that would eventually encompass over 2.6 million square feet of industrial and warehouse space. The marketing materials describe Jean as a gateway between Southern California and Las Vegas, emphasizing the logistical advantages of the location for companies that need to move goods efficiently between these major markets. The developers are clearly playing a long game, waiting for market conditions to improve and for warehouse demand to justify moving forward with construction. And eventually, that may indeed happen. Real estate development is often a matter of timing, and projects that don't make sense in one market environment can become highly profitable when conditions change. There's also a much larger and more speculative development that could potentially transform Jean's future in ways that are difficult to predict. For many years, aviation planners and government officials have discussed the possibility of building the Southern Nevada Supplemental Airport, which would serve as a secondary commercial airport to complement Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas. Harry Reid International, which is located just minutes from the Strip and handles all of Las Vegas's commercial air traffic, is increasingly constrained by its location in the middle of a densely developed urban area. The airport has limited room for expansion, and adding new runways or significantly increasing capacity is extremely difficult given the surrounding development. A supplemental airport located in a more remote area with room for growth could relieve pressure on Harry Reid International and provide additional capacity to support Las Vegas's tourism and business economy. Jean has been mentioned as a potential location for this supplemental airport, and if such a facility were actually built, it would completely transform the area. An airport would bring jobs, infrastructure investment, increased traffic, and all the ancillary development that follows major transportation hubs. The warehouse and distribution complex that's currently on hold would suddenly make much more sense, as proximity to an airport is extremely valuable for logistics operations. Jean could finally have a new identity and a sustainable economic foundation beyond just being a rest stop on the highway. But all of that remains speculative and uncertain. The supplemental airport has been discussed for years without any concrete progress toward actually building it. The warehouse project is on hold with no clear timeline for resuming, and the Dead Hotel continues to stand, slowly deteriorating in the desert sun, a monument to plans that haven't materialized and futures that haven't arrived. For now, Jean remains what it has been for years, a strange, liminal place that exists primarily as a marker on the highway, a place you pass through but don't stay in, a location that seems perpetually on the verge of becoming something else but never quite gets there. The abandoned Terrible's Hotel and Casino, towering over the desert with its broken windows and fire-scarred walls, is the perfect symbol of this state of suspended animation. It was supposed to be demolished years ago, replaced by a modern warehouse complex that would give Jean a new purpose and a new economy. But market forces, timing, and the unpredictable nature of real estate development have left it standing, a ghost building in a ghost town, waiting for a future that may or may not ever arrive. Have you ever visited John, Nevada? Have you driven past the abandoned Terrible's Hotel and wondered about its story? Do you think the area can make a comeback, either as a logistics hub or as something else entirely? The future of Gion, like the future of the dead hotel itself, remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. This building, which was supposed to disappear years ago, has instead become an accidental landmark, a conversation piece, and a reminder that in the desert, things don't always go according to plan. Sometimes buildings that are meant to be demolished just keep standing year after year, becoming more ruined and more iconic with each passing season, until they're no longer just abandoned structures, but symbols of something larger about the American West, about boom and bust cycles, about plans and dreams that don't quite work out the way anyone expected.